The signal the alien warship Verana floated in the darkness of space. Its once proud silver hull now covered in burn marks and holes. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, and the corridors were filled with smoke. The crew moved in silence, each step heavy, each breath shallow. They had been running for days, chased by an enemy fleet that finally caught them near the dead zone. The battle had been brutal, and now they were stranded. Alone and slowly dying, Captain Relar stood on the bridge. Staring at the cracked main screen, numbers flashed, red oxygen dropping, power fading, engines offline. He gripped the console with trembling hands, his mind racing for options. Beside him, First Officer Lyra spoke in a low voice. "Captain, we have to send a distress call." Relar's eyes narrowed. "You know what that means." "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice almost a whisper. "But if we don't, we're all dead in hours." The crew gathered in the central chamber, their faces pale under the emergency lights. They all knew the rules, and SOS went to every civilization in range. And that meant Earth would hear it too. The humans, Deathworlders, as the galaxy called them, were not like the others. They were dangerous. Born on a planet so harsh that even their plants could kill. They had a reputation. If you were innocent, they might save you. If you were guilty, you wouldn't live to regret calling them. Relar looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his officers. "Once we send this," he said slowly, "we can't take it back." He paused, his voice heavy. "If the humans answer, pray they believe our story." Silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of the failing air systems. At last, Relar gave the order, "Send it." Lyra moved to the console and entered the command. A small, piercing tone echoed through the ship. As the SOS burst into the void, it carried a simple message. "Ship disabled. Crew dying. Need immediate aid." The signal repeated itself, bouncing across the stars toward every listening ear. Minutes passed, then hours. Some crew members sat in corners, eyes closed, as if waiting for the end. Others paced the halls, glancing at the ceiling whenever the ship groaned. Relar stayed on the bridge, watching the incoming transmissions list. Most were automated rejections, neutral factions claiming they were too far away. A few offered help, for a price they could never pay, and then a new transmission appeared. It was short, only 3 words. "Message received. En route." But the sender tag made Relar's blood run cold. It was from Earth. The humans had heard. The bridge went silent. Lyra's voice trembled. "They're coming." Relar said nothing. But inside, his thoughts raced. Would they bring mercy or judgment? The crew's mood shifted. Some were relieved, some terrified. The stories about Deathworlders were countless. Some said they could read your eyes and know if you had lied. Others claimed they carried weapons that could split a ship in half. With one shot, one engineer muttered, "Maybe they won't come armed." Another laughed bitterly. "They are humans. They are armed." Relar called for a full systems check, if they were going to meet the humans. He wanted the ship to at least look like they weren't criminals. Weapons were powered down. Logs were cleaned. Damage reports were altered. He told himself it was for safety, but deep inside, he knew it was fear. Fear of what humans would do if they found out the truth about the last battle. 2 days later, the sensors beeped. A small fleet was approaching fast. The crew rushed to the viewing panels. Through the star-speckled darkness, sleek black ships emerged. They were small compared to the Verana, but there was something about them, sharp, precise, deadly. Even from a distance, the alien crew felt a weight in their chests. The humans had arrived. Relar stood straight, adjusting his torn uniform. Lyra whispered, "What do we say?" Relar took a slow breath. "We say thank you. And we pray they don't look too closely." A transmission crackled to life. A human face appeared on the screen, calm, unreadable, eyes sharp as blades. "This is Commander Hawley of the Terran Defense Fleet," the voice said. "Before we assist, we have one question." Relar felt his throat tighten. "Ask." The human's eyes didn't blink. Who fired the first shot in your war? The arrival of the bridge of the Verana was silent. Every crew member stared at the human face on the screen. The question hung in the air like a blade. Who fired the first shot in your war? Captain Relar's mind raced. He could feel the eyes of his officers on him. If he answered wrong, the humans might leave. If he lied and they found out, they might do something far worse. After a long pause, he said carefully, "It depends on which records you believe." The human commander didn't move, didn't even blink. "That is not an answer," he said coldly. "We'll discuss it when we arrive." And the transmission cut off. The crew exhaled as one. Lyra leaned close to Relar, whispering, "They already know." Relar's jaw tightened. "That our only hope is to make them want to save us." Minutes later, the Terran fleet came into full view. Sleek black ships with sharp angles, no wasted space. They looked smaller than the Verana, but every sensor reading screamed danger. The ships moved like predators, fast, smooth, without hesitation. They formed a loose circle around the Verana, blocking any possible escape. A low hum vibrated through the alien hull as the humans locked tractor beams on them. It wasn't an attack, but it was a message. "We control when you move." The docking clamps hit with a heavy thud. Crew members jumped at the sound. Some tried to straighten their uniforms. Others quietly hid anything that might be seen as contraband. Relar ordered the main airlock cleared. "Look cooperative," he told them. "But don't give them reasons to think we're weak." The airlock cycled with a hiss. A group of humans stepped inside. They were medics at least. That's what their armbands said, but each one carried a rifle slung across their chest. Their armor was black with strange markings, their helmets reflecting the alien faces staring back at them. They moved like soldiers who had been here before. Every step measured, every glance sharp. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward. "Commander Hawley will see your captain," the human said. His voice was calm, almost polite, but there was no warmth in it. Relar nodded and stepped forward. The humans surrounded him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel their presence like a cage. They walked him through the docking tunnel into the human flagship. The moment Relar entered, he understood why Deathworlders were feared. The corridors were clean but cold, lit by a pale blue glow. Every human they passed carried a weapon, and every one of them looked at him as if measuring his worth and his threat. Inside the command chamber, Commander Hawley waited. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching a holographic map of the sector. Without turning, he spoke. "Your ship is badly damaged. We can repair it. We can give you food, oxygen, power." Relar waited, knowing there was a but. Hawley turned to face him. "But first, I need to know exactly what happened to your people." Relar tried to explain. "Enemy ambush, running for days, last stand near the dead zone." Hawley listened without interrupting. His eyes locked on Relar's face. When Relar finished, the human spoke slowly. "That is one version of events." The words were like ice. "Here's the problem, Captain," Hawley continued. "We intercepted your enemy's transmissions. They say you attacked first. They say you targeted civilians." Relar felt the air grow heavier. "That is a lie," he said quickly. "Maybe," Hawley replied. "Maybe not. That's why we're here. We don't grant mercy to the guilty." The human stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But if you're telling the truth, you have nothing to fear." Relar knew better. When it came to Deathworlders, even the innocent had something to fear. Hours later, human teams spread through the Verana. They brought food and oxygen tanks, repaired the worst damage. But they also scanned every terminal, copied every log. Some crew whispered that the humans were here to save them. Others whispered that the humans were building a case against them. Lyra found Relar in the observation deck, staring at the human ships outside. "They move like predators," she said softly. Relar didn't take his eyes off them. "That's because they are." In the distance, more human ships were arriving. Not rescue ships, warships. Relar's stomach sank. They hadn't just answered the SOS. They had brought judgment with them. Deathworld diplomacy. The humans work quickly, in less than a day. The Varana had more power running through its systems than it had in the last week. Lights glowed brighter, oxygen levels rose. The heat came back to the cold metal halls. But the crew did not relax, because for every repair the humans made, they also searched every panel, every console, every storage locker. Nothing was left untouched. Captain Rilar watched from the bridge as a human officer connected a black device to the navigation controls. "What is that?" Rilar asked, his voice tight. The human didn't look up. "Data transfer," Rilar frowned. "Our navigation system is damaged." The officer's reply was calm. "We're not looking for directions, Captain. We're looking for truth." In the mess hall, the alien crew ate human rations for the first time. The food was strange, dense, high in protein, and flavored with spices they'd never tasted before. Some of the crew whispered in awe about human generosity. Others noticed the armed guards in every corner and kept their mouths shut. Lyra approached Rilar later, her voice low. "They're talking to the crew one by one." "Always alone, always recording," Rilar nodded grimly. "They're building a picture of us." "Or a case," Lyra added. The next meeting with Commander Holly was worse than the first. The human stood at the head of a long metal table, flanked by two silent soldiers. He gestured for Rilar to sit. "Your ship's logs," Holly began, "show an engagement with enemy forces 3 days before your distress call." Rilar stayed still. "Yes, they attacked first." Hale's eyes narrowed. "The enemy says you fired first. You destroyed 2 of their medical transports." Rilar's chest tightened. "Those ships were armed." "They fired on us." Holly studied him for a long moment, then leaned forward. "If you're lying, Captain, I'll know." Humans are very good at finding lies. Outside the meeting room, human engineers replaced panels and rewired circuits with speed and precision. They spoke little, but their eyes followed every alien who passed. Some smiled faintly, others didn't bother. The aliens had the uneasy sense that the humans weren't here as friends or enemies, but as judges. Later that cycle, the humans invited Rilar and his officers to the Ardent, the flagship. The invitation was not optional. When they arrived, they were led to a large observation room. Through the wide glass wall, they could see Earth's warships positioned in a perfect formation around the Varana. Lyra whispered, "It's like they're holding us in a cage." Rilar said nothing, but he couldn't shake the feeling she was right. Holly entered with a datapad in hand. "We've contacted the Galactic Council," he said. "They've asked us to report our findings." Rilar's eyes widened. This meant whatever humans decided would be heard by every major power in the galaxy. Hale's voice was calm. "We don't take sides in wars, unless civilians are harmed. Then, we take only one side: justice." The word justice hung heavy in the air for Deathworlders. It meant more than laws. It meant survival of the fittest, punishment without hesitation. Rilar knew the humans were feared because they never backed down once they decided someone was guilty. The questioning continued. They wanted names of enemy ships, lists of orders, recordings from battles. They wanted to know why the Varana had been near a colony that was later destroyed. Every answer Rilar gave seemed to lead to another, sharper question. By the end, he felt drained, as if every secret of his ship had been pulled out and placed under a bright light. Back on the Varana, tension spread like cold mist. Some crew wanted to confess everything, hoping for mercy. Others insisted on sticking to their story, afraid that telling the truth would doom them all. Arguments broke out in the corridors. Even the sound of human boots on metal floors made conversation stop instantly. That night cycle, Rilar stood alone in the observation deck. Beyond the glass, the black human ships floated silently. They didn't need to move, didn't need to show force. Their very presence was enough to keep an entire warship's crew on edge. Lyra joined him, carrying 2 cups of human-brewed coffee. "They're not like anyone else," she said quietly. Rilar nodded. "They don't rescue for kindness. They rescue to decide if you deserve to live." In the far distance, one of the human warships rotated. Its weapon ports briefly visible, Relar stared at them and thought of the SOS they had sent. He had wanted salvation, but now, with every passing hour, he wondered if they had only called their own executioners. The price of rescue the next morning cycle. The humans called Captain Relar to the Arden again. No explanation, no warning, just an order to report. 2 human soldiers escorted him through the docking tunnel. Their rifles held casually but never far from ready. Relar's footsteps echoed in the cold metal hallway, each one heavier than the last. Commander Halle was waiting in the same meeting room. This time, there were more humans officers in dark uniforms, each with datapads and unreadable expressions. On the table in front of Halle sat a sealed black case. Relar's eyes lingered on it. It wasn't large enough to hold a weapon, but it carried the same weight. "Sit," Halle said simply. Relar obeyed. The door hissed shut behind him, locking with a sound that reminded him of a prison cell. Halle spoke without looking up from his pad. "Your ship is almost fully repaired." Relar felt a flicker of hope. Hal's next words killed it. "But repairs are not the same as freedom." Relar leaned forward slowly. "I don't understand." Halle finally looked at him. "Your distress call was answered. And by our laws, that makes you under our protection." He paused. "Protection comes with rules." He tapped the black case, and it unlocked with a soft click. Inside were several slim data drives and a stack of thin metal tablets. Halle slid one toward Relar. "This," he said, "is our price for rescue." Relar picked up the tablet. Reading the first few lines, his stomach tightened. It was a contract, a binding agreement that the Varana and its crew would submit to human oversight for an undefined period. Their movements, cargo, and communications would be monitored. All battle records would be handed over for evaluation, and the humans reserved the right to intervene at any time, for any reason. "This isn't rescue," Relar said quietly. "This is control." Hale's eyes were hard. "Captain, let's be clear. We are not your allies. We are not your enemies. We are the only reason your crew is breathing right now." He leaned in. "You sent an SOS to Deathworlders. That means you accept our terms, or you accept the alternative." Relar didn't have to ask what the alternative was. He could see it in the way the human soldiers stood at the door. He could see it in the warships outside, silent and waiting. Still, he tried. "We didn't commit the crimes they claim. We don't deserve this treatment." Hale's tone didn't change. "Then you have nothing to fear from our oversight." Relar returned to the Varana with the contract in hand. The crew gathered in the mess hall as he explained what had happened. The room erupted. "This is slavery." One officer shouted, "They saved our lives." Another argued, "We owe them something." "They'll watch us forever," someone whispered. "We'll never be free again." Lyra stood and silenced them with a sharp look. They gave us 2 choices, she said. "Live under their rules or die in space." Her words hung in the air like a cold wind. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Relar said, "I'll sign it. Because I want my crew to live." The next day, human engineers brought the final components for the repairs. But now, every corridor of the Varana had new devices, small black boxes mounted near doors and control panels. The humans didn't explain what they were, but everyone guessed. Trackers, recorders, watchers. It was clear the price had already been collected. Later, Relar met Halle one last time before the fleet's departure. "You've made the right choice," Halle said. Relar forced a nod. Hale's next words made his skin crawl. "Captain, if you truly are innocent, this will be temporary. If not, we'll know." As the human fleet began to move, the Varana's crew watched through the viewing ports. The black ships pulled away with perfect formation, silent and sharp as knives. But even with the distance growing, the alien crew could still feel them. Not as saviors, not as friends, but as a shadow that would follow them wherever they went. Relar stood on the bridge, looking at the signed contract on the console. He remembered the moment he gave the order to send. The SOS, back then, it had felt like hope. Now it felt like the beginning of a sentence he didn't know how to finish. Tension in the dark, the Verana moved slowly through deep space. Her engines were repaired, her power restored, her crew alive, but there was no sense of victory on board. Only the cold weight of invisible chains. Every corridor now carried the faint hum of human devices. Black boxes on the walls blinked with tiny red lights. They were silent, harmless looking. But everyone knew they were watching. Every conversation, every movement, every button pressed was being recorded. At first, the crew tried to act normal. They spoke in calm voices, kept their routines, followed orders, but it didn't last. Within a week, whispers started, quiet conversations in storage rooms or inside maintenance shafts, places where the hum of the devices was a little fainter. Relar noticed the change in his officers. Meetings were shorter, voices lower, glances sharper. It wasn't just fear, it was suspicion. Every crew member now wondered, who might talk to the humans? One night cycle, the ship's lights flickered. It was nothing unusual for a vessel still recovering from heavy damage, but the effect was immediate. People froze mid-step, eyes darting toward the black boxes. It felt like the darkness itself was watching. Later, in the engineering bay, a young technician named Saren tried to bypass one of the devices. He said it was just to see how it worked. He never got the chance. Within minutes, the humans knew. A voice came over the comms, calm but sharp. "Captain Relar, please remind your crew that tampering with Terran equipment is unwise." No one saw Saren for the rest of the day. When he returned, he wouldn't say what had happened, but his hands shook whenever a human's voice came over the speakers. The tension grew. Meals in the mess hall became silent. Laughter vanished, replaced by the low hum of the ship's systems and the ever-present blink of red lights. Even the sound of boots on metal floors felt heavier now. Lyra came to Relar late one cycle. "They're controlling us without being here," she said quietly. "They don't have to threaten us, Captain." "They've already won." Relar didn't answer, because he knew she was right. Then, without warning, the humans cut power to half the ship. One moment the Verana was lit and warm, the next, whole sections were swallowed in darkness. Doors froze shut. Life support slowed in certain areas. The crew panicked, thinking it was sabotage. The comms crackled, and Commander Hale's voice filled the ship. "Captain Relar, this is a systems test. Stand by." The lights returned minutes later, but the message was clear. If the humans wanted, they could shut the Verana down with a single command. In the days that followed, Relar noticed strange patterns. Some crew members were being called to private talks in the comms room. They returned quiet, avoiding eye contact. It was impossible to know if these meetings were interrogations, friendly chats, or recruitment for informants. One evening, Relar entered the navigation room and found a human officer there. The man smiled politely. "Routine inspection," he said. But Relar could see the navigation logs on the screen, the humans scrolling through their past routes. It wasn't a routine inspection, it was surveillance. The breaking point came during a long jump through empty space in the middle of the night cycle. Alarms screamed. A crew member had tried to send a coded message to an allied ship. The transmission never left the Verana. Within seconds, human voice channels filled the air. Attempt to transmit unauthorized data detected. "Captain Relar, deal with it, or we will." Relar had no choice. He had the crew member confined to quarters under guard. The rest of the crew saw it happen. No one asked questions. They knew the humans had turned the captain into their enforcer. By the end of the week, the Verana was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Not the peaceful quiet of a safe ship, but the suffocating quiet of people who no longer trusted each other. Even Relar could feel the change in himself. Every word he spoke was measured, every movement calculated. He wasn't just leading the crew anymore. He was surviving inside a cage. Late one cycle, as the ship drifted through a starless stretch, A void. Relar stood alone in the observation deck. The stars outside seemed distant, cold, in the reflection of the glass. He could see the red blink of one of the human devices behind him. It looked almost like an eye, watching, recording, remembering. He closed his eyes and thought of the moment they'd sent the SOS. He had imagined a fleet coming to save them. Now he realized he had invited something far more dangerous onto his ship. The humans didn't need to fire a single shot to control them. They already owned the Varana. Judgment Day, the Varana had been traveling under human guidance for days. The crew still didn't know their destination. The humans gave no details. No explanations, only navigation orders. Every course change came from Commander Hale's voice over the comms. Every change brought a deeper sense of dread. On the 6th day, the stars ahead shifted. Through the forward viewport, a massive asteroid came into view. It was jagged and dark, but one side gleamed with artificial light. Dozens of landing bays were carved into the rock like open jaws, human. Warships floated around it like silent guards. Lyra stood beside Captain Relar on the bridge. "Where is this place?" She whispered. Relar's voice was grim. "Somewhere no one comes willingly." The docking orders were precise. Follow the beacon, power down weapons, drop shields. Failure to comply would mean destruction. No one doubted that the humans would. Make good on that threat. As the Varana entered the largest hangar, huge steel doors slid shut behind them. The bay was silent except for the heavy clank of docking clamps locking into place. A voice came over the comms, "Captain Relar," and "Senior officers, disembark immediately." Relar gathered his officers, their faces pale under the harsh bay lights. Humans waited at the airlock, armed but calm. They escorted the group through long corridors carved into the asteroid's heart. Every step took them deeper underground. Every turn brought more armed humans into view. Finally, they reached a large chamber. It was not a courtroom, but it had the same weight. Rows of human officers lined the sides, their expressions unreadable. At the far end stood a raised platform where Commander Hawley waited, a tall woman. In a black uniform sat beside him. Her insignia marked her as high command, someone with the authority to end lives with a word. Relar and his officers were made to stand in the center of the room. The woman spoke first, her voice cold and steady. "You sent a distress signal to Earth," she said, "and we responded. By our law, that gives us the right to investigate your actions." "That investigation is complete." Relar's throat tightened. "What did you find?" Hawley tapped a control, and a massive screen lit up. Images and recordings filled the room. Footage from the Varana's own logs. Intercepted enemy transmissions. Satellite scans, every piece of data told the same story. The Varana had been present at the destruction of a civilian colony. Multiple civilian transports had been destroyed, and all available evidence pointed to them firing the first shot. Lyra stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Those ships were armed. They attacked us." The woman on the platform cut her off. "Perhaps. But your logs show no warnings given, no attempts to confirm targets before firing." Relar felt the room closing in. "This is not the full story," he said. Hale's voice was quiet, but it carried across the chamber. "The problem, Captain, is that every full story has two sides, and we've seen both. Yours is the weaker one." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the hum of the air vents seemed distant. Finally, the woman in black leaned forward. "Under Terran law, deliberate. Attacks on civilian targets are war crimes." She let the words hang in the air. "The punishment is execution of the responsible parties and seizure of the vessel." Gasps erupted from the alien officers. Two stepped back instinctively, as if the words themselves were weapons. Relar's heart pounded. He knew that if the humans decided to act, no one in the Varana would make it out. But then Hawley spoke. "There is another option." Every head turned toward him. "You can work for us, under our command. You will serve until we decide your debt is paid. In return, your lives will be spared." Relar looked at his crew. He saw fear in every face. This was not mercy, it was a sentence, but it was life. And in the cold emptiness of space, life was more than most could hope for. I accept, Relar said at last. His voice heavy. Lyra closed her eyes. Holly nodded once. Wise, the human stepped forward, placing metallic bands on each officer's wrist. They will track your location, monitor your vitals, and transmit your status directly to us. Holly explained, no removal, no tampering. As the humans led them out, Relar glanced back at the platform. The woman in black was still watching him. Her voice followed him to the door. Remember, Captain Mercy from Deathworlders is never free. Deathworld verdict. The Varana left the asteroid base under heavy escort. 4 Terran warships surrounded her like predators guiding prey. Their formation was perfect, their movements silent and precise. It was clear to everyone on board. They were not free, they were owned. The metallic wristbands the humans had given them felt heavier than any chain. At first, some crew tried to ignore them, but within hours they discovered the truth. The devices pulsed faintly every few minutes, sending signals to the Terran fleet, no matter where they went, no matter what they did. The humans would know on the bridge. Captain Relar stood at the viewport. The black hulls of the Terran ships glimmered in the cold starlight. Lyra stepped beside him, her voice low. Do you think they'll ever take these off? She asked, touching her wristband. Relar didn't look at her. No, he said. Not until they've taken what they want from us. Orders from the Terran commander came soon after. The Varana would not return to her homeworld. Instead, she was to follow the Terran fleet to a war zone on the edge of known space. They were being sent on det missions, dangerous assignments that no one else wanted. The kind of missions where survival was a reward. The crew reacted with mixed emotions. Some were angry, calling it slavery. Others, though bitter, accepted it. Living under Deathworlder command was still living, and in their minds, living meant a chance to escape. Someday, 3 days into the journey, the Terrans made their first demand. The Varana was ordered to intercept a smuggler convoy that had been supplying weapons to both sides of a local conflict. The humans didn't give details, they simply handed over coordinates and expected the aliens to act. Failure, the message said plainly, will count against your debt. Relar gathered his officers in the strategy room. They're testing us, he said. They want to see how well we follow orders. Lyra crossed her arms. And if we fail? Relar's answer was simple. Then we find out what happens when Deathworlders lose patience. The mission was short and brutal. The smugglers never stood a chance. The Varana's weapons tore through their unarmored hulls. When it was over, the humans said nothing. They simply recorded the results and moved on. Days turned into weeks. The Varana carried out patrols, escorted Terran supply ships, intercepted enemy scouts. Each mission chipped away at the crew's sense of independence. Each success was met not with thanks, but with more orders one night. Cycle, Relar stood alone in the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before him. He thought of the day they had sent the SOS. How desperate they had been, how hopeful, and how wrong. Lyra joined him quietly. Do you think we'll ever be free of them? She asked. Relar didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the distant glimmer of the Terran flagship. Finally he said, free, no, but maybe trusted. Enough to move without the leash so tight. The next day, Commander Holly himself hailed the Varana. His face filled the screen, calm as ever. Captain, he said, your crew has performed adequately. Continue this path, and your debt will be reduced. Relar kept his voice steady. And when the debt is gone? Hale's expression didn't change. Then you will be free to go. But understand this when you call Deathworlders for help. You never walk away unchanged. When the transmission ended, Lyra turned to Relar. They're never going to let us go, are they? Relar looked at the dark screen. They might, he said. But by then, we won't be the same people who asked for help. The Varana sailed on. Her hull bore fresh scars from recent battles. Her crew moved with a new discipline part. Fear, part survival, and always in the corner of their vision were the black Terran warships. Silent, watching. In the quiet moments, Relar thought about the galaxy stories of Deathworlders. How they never gave mercy without a price. How those who accepted their help were marked forever. Now, he understood. Mercy from Deathworlders was not a gift, it was a contract. And the Varana had signed it in desperation. As the Terran fleet jumped to the next sector, a final message came over the comms from Commander Halle. His voice was calm, but his words were heavy. Captain Relar, remember sending an SOS to Earth comes with a price. And Deathworlders never grant mercy. Relar said nothing in reply, because deep down, he knew the message wasn't just a reminder. It was a promise.